Greetings and welcome to a League of Legends video. My name is Barris Aurelius. I have a short one, but I think a good one for you today, so let's get started. Illaoi has long been a champion that many find fun to play as or frustrating to play against, and this mainly comes down to the soul-stealing mechanic on her E ability, Test of Spirit. While Illaoi's E, Test of Spirit, is a skill shot and as such is not guaranteed to land, it effectively tethers her entire kit, becoming the focal point for her interactions around laning and combat in general. Despite this, the idea of pulling spirits and creating vessels is a really awesome idea and core to who Illaoi is as a champion. So how do we change that mechanic and make it more fair without drastically changing how Illaoi plays and feels? Well, I think I have an idea and I will lay it out here. The way a spirit is pulled from an enemy champion needs more counterplay to it. I think the best way to do this without overcomplicating the interaction or creating a kit that is hard to adapt in-game is by having Illaoi's abilities mark enemy champions. For the sake of brevity, let's call these Test of Spirit stacks or Test of Spirit marks. We can come up with a better name later. But this is how it would work, essentially. Leveling E causes all of Illaoi's other abilities to mark enemy champions. Once a set level of marks are reached, we can decide that later, the champion's spirit is pulled out a short distance towards Illaoi. This would consume all of the marks, and at that point the interaction with the Test of Spirit plays out as normal. Well, okay, but how does this work with the active on Illaoi's Test of Spirit ability? Because that is a targeted skill shot that goes in the line. How does that work with stacks? Well, this is where the big change needs to come in. But I do think it can be done in a way that is easily implemented in-game by the dev team using pre-existing animations, sounds, and effects. And I do have a couple examples here I can show you, but there are a lot of things that Illaoi does in-game that could potentially jankily be changed to work for a new E ability, in my opinion. As you can see here, the melee slam animation for Illaoi's W ability might actually be perfect for her new E ability as well. It could work. So let me lay out how the ability would read, and I'll give some examples of how it might look as well. E, Test of Spirit, is a targeted ability with 950 range that is the same as live, and it is a small area AoE. Think size-wise something similar to Xerath W, and I'll show an example here so you know what I mean in case you've never played Xerath or faced one. Picture an area of effect similar to this for the Illaoi E, where a tentacle pops up and anyone caught in that circle radius is slowed by a percentage. And here is how the ability reads. Illaoi slams her idol into the ground with the same self-stun duration as the current E, so if you played against Illaoi, she has to root herself for a second to launch her tentacle forward. So this current animation would be similar in time as the new one for how long she's rooted. Hopefully the same. Well, let me start over just to make the point clear for the active ability. Illaoi slams her idol into the ground, and after a short delay, erupts a tentacle from the ground at the target location. The tentacle slows in an area all enemy champions hit by some percentage for some amount of time. Let's say half of, or close to half of what her current slow is on Test of Spirit. Maybe 40% for 0.4 seconds, something like that. And it commands all other tentacles in range to attack the target area. So Illaoi roots herself for a short duration and spawns a tentacle in a target area that she chooses, very similar to how Xerath W works. And it immediately, upon casting, slows any enemy champions in the area. Okay, so the tentacle will spawn as normal, as a normal tentacle does, over 2 seconds. And then after that, it'll have a short life. So 4 seconds is what I was thinking, but something temporary. Since it's not on the wall, it'll almost act like one of the tentacles spawned from her ultimate. The tentacle will spawn as normal, unless under the influence of R, her ultimate ability, with a 2-second delay, and the slow will still happen immediately. But the tentacle will remain for 4 seconds before disappearing. And that time can be varied, but I'm thinking a short duration of time just to allow it to get one slam off in case Illaoi is able to use her W or something else. And the passive for the new E ability would read, Illaoi's abilities and tentacle slams mark enemy champions with a Test of Spirit stack for 4 seconds, refreshing on subsequent hits and stacking 5 times. Stacks fall off at 1 per 1 second. At 5 stacks, the target spirit is pulled a short distance from their body in the direction of Illaoi, consuming all test of spirit stacks and tethering them as normal. Spirit damage transmission, I would change from, it's currently alive 25 to 45 plus 8% per 100 AD. I would actually change that to 20 to 40 plus 10% per 100 AD. And my reasoning for that is I think Illaoi is healthier if she builds bruiser items, so less tank, more attack damage. So how does this change Illaoi's interaction with other champions? For starters, it gives enemy champions the agency to back away and let stacks fall off, much like you'd see with Talon or something like that. And this applies even if they can't dodge the Illaoi E. So getting hit by an Illaoi E for the enemy champion, the enemy laner, doesn't mean that they immediately fall into this mini-game. And also Illaoi isn't as penalized as much for missing an E. It's not as weighted as heavily. This, to me, makes the entire lane versus Illaoi far more interesting to play. If she manages to land all of her abilities, she is rewarded with testing the enemy champion spirit. This also can fit thematically, too. It makes sense it would be a little harder to pull the Spirit of Champions on the Rift compared to, like, the average person. Illaoi has to rough him up a bit and get in motion. This also helps Illaoi in some of her harder matchups. I'll go over a few examples here. Mordekaiser, for example, now has to be cognizant of how many tested spirit stacks he has, as Illaoi might be able to pull his spirit in his R, the Death Realm, simply by landing a Q or a W. She doesn't have to land the E anymore, and even if she'd already used her E, she might still have a few other spells, combined with some stacks to get a tentacle spawn in the Death Realm, which allows Illaoi to start healing up and to get her game plan going. Another hard counter, or one that is often considered a hard counter, is Gwen. Gwen now actually has to worry about a tentacle spawning inside of her mist, so she may actually be forced to reposition to avoid that new E Illaoi ability where she can just spawn the tentacle right inside Gwen's mist. For range matchups like Quinn or Teemo, Illaoi is still at a disadvantage, of course, but those champions can no longer hide behind minions to avoid Illaoi's E, and she can command tentacle slams from range. This also gives Illaoi another way to farm from range if things get desperate. Now, you all may have noticed, based on how I've been describing the kit update thus far, an interesting new interaction with this form of Illaoi. I'll get to that in a bit, but first some specifics and numbers on the rest of how Illaoi's kit will work. Illaoi's passive remains the same, but Illaoi's Q and all tentacle slams now apply 2 stacks of Test of Will. This obviously only applies once Illaoi takes a point in E. For W, now applies 1 Test of Spirit stack, and Illaoi's new E will also apply 2 Test of Spirit stacks. Essentially, all tentacle slams will spawn 2 Test of Spirit stacks. So as you can see, a Q-W-E combo in some order, or 2 abilities in any order, and a tentacle slam will pull the spirit from the enemy champ. Illaoi's ultimate is where it gets really interesting though. It essentially works as normal, but it applies 3 Test of Spirit stacks to all champions hit. I would also change Illaoi's R damage to 100, 200, 300 plus 55% AD from the live 150, 250, 350 plus 50% AD. The goal being Illaoi building more bruiser than tank, as we discussed earlier. So yes, as you might have predicted, this would allow Illaoi to potentially pull multiple spirits at the same time. To compensate, I would reduce healing from tentacle slams to the second spirit onward by more than half. Say something like 2% missing HP, with the live missing HP being 5% on tentacle slams. And as stated above, I would put more of the spirit transfer bonus damage into her AD scaling. If this is a little too tricky to code, a straight nerf to the tentacle slam healing, something like 3.5 or 4% instead of 5, might be needed instead. And then I would also reduce spawn tentacles on her ultimate to 5 from 6, as there might potentially be more spirits in play. Alternatively, or in addition, the recent buffs to Illaoi's health growth, mana, and mana growth could be reverted, as I'm not even sure these were really needed to begin with, once the tentacle range was in play. This also means that when an enemy ganks Illaoi in lane, she can't just land her E to get a spirit. Illaoi will need to plan a bit more to get the spirit pull, playing more around her tentacles to help with the stacking Test of Spirit. So how does this all tie together? Illaoi would now have a new E ability, one that passively allows all her other abilities to apply stacks to enemy champions. These stacks go up to 5, at which point they are removed and a spirit is pulled from that champion. The new E active works similarly to a Xerath W, targeting a location to spawn a timed tentacle, similar to an Illaoi ultimate tentacle, that slows and applies stacks to enemy champions. Illaoi's ultimate applies stacks, and she can theoretically pull spirits from multiple champions at once now. Illaui's hardest matchups are a bit less of a hard counter than they would be on live, and other champions have more opportunity for counterplay into Illaoi. So, what do you think? Do you like the idea? Is there anything you would do differently? Would you like to see this in-game as an Illaoi player? Would this make laning against Illaoi more fun? Please let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.